Really interesting presentations this afternoon, and thanks, Christian, for the opportunity to come along today. Super exciting. We love any opportunity to talk about PayTo. So we just wanted to spend a bit of time just kind of talking about what does it all really mean. So I might start with coming back to some of the use cases, and I know, Nathan, you mentioned some, and Jill, you had some as well. But when we actually think about PayTo and how it's going to roll out, what do you think we're actually going to really start to see in the marketplace? Where do you think some of the initial activity might be?
I think that wallet and account funding is actually a really good, easy one to start with, because the experience that someone has when they've got an account already and they're adding their payment agreement to it, and then they're getting that seamless experience afterwards, it's just a really obvious introduction. Billing for direct debit replacement, another obvious one, and then e-commerce and those more one-time experiences will follow later.
Christian, any thoughts to add to that?
I think the first use case is going to be the most obvious one, which is going to be just some kind of direct debit equivalent. But then very rapidly, it's going to move into, I think, this sort of more corporate use cases of funding large-scale payouts. So payroll, dividends, that kind of stuff. One use case that we're very excited about, again, exciting here, it might seem like a nerdy sensation, but it's not uncool, which is that with PayTo, something that was brought up particularly by you, Nathan, earlier, is that you have the ability to move money from point A to point B without it ever going to us. So at the moment, anyone who asks us to help them with their payments has to also be happy with us sitting on their funds for even just 2-3 seconds. You know, they can make money in, money out, but we are going to have the money with us at some point. And that's all fine in most cases, but in many instances where we're dealing with custodial accounts, trust settings, and whatever else, it's not okay. Not even for a fraction of a second can money sit somewhere else but with the trustor or the trustee. And that opens a huge industry for further automation. And so I think we'll actually see some of that surprisingly early, but obviously it requires business accounts to be enabled and lots of other things.
Great. And Jill, let's come back to the CDR piece. I mean, what do you think with CDR and payment initiation, some of the kind of really early use cases we might start to see?
Yeah, we went live, I think it was last week. I feel like it feels like it's about 2 months ago, but it was just last week, with someone that's really interested in payments. And they want to access the data, analyze it, and essentially start to debit, not necessarily just smart direct debits, but they're really looking at partnerships with some major merchants. So we're pretty excited about that. It's not just like a B2C proposition, but how do you get some like really big retailers in town starting to look at this as well? So hopefully that will be public. I was going to say next month, but no, that's actually this month. That's in August. So I'm excited. Yeah, a lot of the use cases that we hear about, they're simple, they're similar, but that's actually a good thing, because I feel like in terms of implementing a use case, it's even better if it's existing. It decreases the risk, it decreases the timeline. They don't have to build a brand new product, but they can just make something that they have existing smoother and faster and just a bit better, and then go build all the really sexy, cool new things.
Excellent, exciting times. So Nathan, in your presentation, you showcased sort of CDR and PayTo working together. Yep. What do you think we need to really make sure we focus on to actually make that a reality? And how do we make sure that it ends up in, a kind of great customer experience?
So part of it will be banks embracing the fact that it is starting to move towards one ecosystem, and the conversations with regulators to look at how do we leverage what we've already got so that we can get to a good customer experience faster and spend less time in building new infrastructure and more time focusing on what customers are going to get a benefit from. So focusing on the use cases that, and again, looking at existing capabilities, like Jill said, will actually move us forward faster. So that's certainly our position, and I think that part of the things that have been built into regulations and rules for PayTo open us up to that. So it's also making sure people understand what's possible. So again, making sure that in forums like this we start talking about, and then we have people in the industry who are saying, but can't we just do it like this, as opposed to looking to reinvent?
Yeah. And certainly, I find when you actually see someone using it and somebody actually out there, that's one of the most powerful ways of bringing it to life, right? So I think, some of those early use cases are going to be really critical to really help people kind of get their heads around it. Sorry, Jill, I think you were going to...
Yeah, I think that having the combined user experience is really important, because there's no point just being like, well, this is the consent over here, this is a consent over here, but like, well, what actually makes the most sense, and how do we just not introduce more cognitive friction for the client as well? I think that I know that the rulemaking team at Treasury is very much excited and focused on not reinventing the wheel. And gosh, even when you talk to other banks, if you're like, so data holder implementation was a really fun, long process, let's do this again, I think they'd probably all just, well, it probably wouldn't go well. So I think not reinventing the wheel would be important.
I think that's definitely a kind of a given. I think that we want to try and avoid that. I mean, we've been talking about PayTo in the industry since early 2017. So given it's 2022, I don't think we want to go back to the drawing board, that's for sure. So, but as a kind of a customer, I mean, why should I really care about CDR and payment initiation? I mean, what's it going to mean for me?
I think that it's all about a value exchange, really. No one cares. Well, sorry, besides me. You don't care about the regulatory frameworks. You just want to know this is safe, this really works, and I want this to solve a problem for me. How annoying is it when you find like a direct debit that's just been there and be like, oh man, I've missed this for the past 14 months. Like, I wish I would have had visibility of it, or something like a way to action this really easily. I think that with the existing consent dashboard of what you can view, what's expired, what's revoked, having that really easy centralized visibility of your initiations and your authorizations is really important, because it reminds me when I met Nathan. I think it was like 2013. I was a product owner at A&P Bank, and we were implementing a Visa debit card, and contactless was starting to come out. That was a question when people were like, contactless, how does this work? What about liability? What if I drop my card on the sidewalk and I'm going to lose all of my money? Those questions went out the window when you're like, my life is easier, I'm going to use this and move on. That's how I see CDR and PayTo really working together, solving problems for the value exchange.
And I think people will care about it because the experiences and the capabilities that businesses, whether they be platforms or whether they be apps or whether they be other trusted parties, they'll be much richer. So again, it becomes, payments is great, but payments are really good when they're not a payment, but they're actually an outcome of something else. And so the CDR experiences will make that something else much richer and give them insights from all of their financial life and not just be transactional.
And I think that what's really important here, and Jill, I think, puts it very elegantly, it's that if there is no solution if there isn't a problem. So if we're all out here, coming up with this amazing solution and we cannot find anyone who has a problem, then it's not a solution even. It's just something that we found was really cool. And so it's all about where do we find something that needs to be solved, and this is the way that we solve it with. And so that's why I initially think that the sort of stuff that people really know, this is a problem for me, either as a consumer, which is not actually the only group of people who will care about this, either as a consumer because, yes, you've had 14 months of someone taking money out of your account and you forgot about it, and every month you tell yourself, I'm going to call them next month, and then you don't. That's a problem that some will identify with and think that'd be great if I didn't have to do that. That might be enough to break the barrier into PayTo for that person. For others, merchants, it's the direct receipt of funds. And at the moment, and this is not just against direct debits, but also against cards. Again, cards are great and have served us very well for 60 years or so. But at the moment, a merchant gets the guarantee of funds right now, but you actually get the money tomorrow. If I'm a merchant and I see all these people walking out of my shop, whether online or in person, and they're walking out with all my goods, and all I have right now is a guarantee that Visa and MasterCard are really good people, then that's fine. But if I knew that they're good people and I have money right now that I can buy the next set of shoes for, then that just seems like an even better situation for me to be in. So I think there too, there is that sense of, is there a problem? can I think of a way that this will help me with that problem? Well, that's what we're going to do. The last thing to bring up is just, I think Nathan was talking about the payments experience. To me, no one cares about a payments experience even. It is something we have to care about at the moment, but it's not what we want to care about. We want to care about buying the shoes. We want to care about having a nice dinner. And then payment is something that's just meant to be working. And so far, I think we've been sort of conditioned to think of them as two separate things. I had a great dinner, but it took forever for the waiter to show up with the terminal, and the terminal didn't have any receipts and whatever. But you can still have a great dinner. I think very quickly you start feeling, well, in an Uber type world, the payment is part of the experience. And if one of them is bad, then everything is a bit worse. So if you can go to a place where the payment's really easy and they offer a great dinner, another one where the payment's really hard and they offer a great dinner too, you're going to go for the place that has just a great dinner and payment's really easy. So for both merchants and for consumers, payment's something that, frankly, to my own dismay here as a payments company, you sort of don't want to be visible. You don't want to be seen. You work best when no one cares about you. And PayTo, I think, takes us a long way towards becoming invisible.
And which I totally agree with. And I think certainly some of the customer proposition is really strong as well from a kind of visibility and control. But let's talk maybe more about your customers, Christian. I mean, and you've touched on a few of those elements today. I mean, why should your businesses and your customers care about PayTo? What are some of the things they can kind of expect to see as benefits?
Well, one of them is that at the moment, you feel like clients are very clearly delineated in between account-to-account payments people, and that's generally something to do with, I don't know, maybe there's lending somewhere in the system, or maybe there's an FX transaction somewhere in the system. So areas where they're generally not, or investments, I guess more broadly as well, generally you don't use credit or a credit card to pay for I don't know, shares. You probably can, I'm not sure actually if that's allowed, but you generally don't. And in those contexts, the push payment experience, which we have now, works, but it's like, oh, okay, now I had to, again, leave the platform, go to my bank, which might be a great bank, but you still need to leave and then come back. So one really elegant solution that PayTo offers here is the fact that you can stay in exactly that place beyond the first authorization possibly. But even that, you can think of like 3D Secure sort of turned that for cards into a really elegant solution where you can feel really safe. And then when you pop up that tells me I'm authorizing, but I haven't left. So for the first, it's for push, for clients that kind of need to rely on bank accounts to bank account transactions, this is going to be much more elegant, seamless, secure for their customers, etc. Fraud risk, I would argue, would go down massively on these sort of things. But then also for companies that maybe not our clients yet and who are using cards are going to say, well, do I want to pay on a sort of ad valorem 1.3% for this transaction when I can pay a few cents instead and actually get something that is faster? I get the money much faster myself. I think they're going to look at least twice and then hopefully a third time and they'll say, yeah, we're in.
Great. And we've talked about how fantastic it is, which of course it is. Not that I'm biased, it's like my fourth child. But are there any limits or disadvantages, do you think, that with PayTo and CDR that consumers and merchants should be aware of?
I guess there'll always be a time or certain accounts that are not going to be reachable, that you won't be able to set a payment agreement up on. So that's one of the limitations. But in some respects, we have that now because not every account certainly has a debit card on it. So you have to use different accounts. So I think consumers are already trained that certain account types they won't use at certain merchants. So while it's a challenge, it's not a dead end. So, and when we launch, there'll be a ramp up of banks over about a 12-month period. So we'll actually start to get used to learning how to manage that variability as part of this learning experience as we go. So what we should do is we'll turn the initial period of high variability into something that supports the long term and a long tail where there'll always be that.
I would totally agree with that. I think it's about consumer education. Again, throw back to contactless. Remember the first time you use that, you're like, what is this? What's my limit? Oh, what if it happens? Do I have to put in my PIN in? How does this work? You learn pretty quickly. Even with CDR, like how many people have actually done a CDR consent? Maybe you've seen a video, maybe you I don't even know. But you're like, who's even live? What's a use case? How do I do this? I think that like the first time that you do it or the second time, you might be like, there's things to read, there's things to continue, consider. But the whole point of developing economy-wide customer experience standards, so it is that whether you're giving your energy data to iSelect or whether you're giving banking data to Nano Home Loans, it's really, really consistent. So sure, you might have to, figure it out the first time, but it gets really easy. I'm very fast at consents, just patting myself on the back.
Yeah, it's like once you kind of, do it once, then you're up and running, right? So.
And it wouldn't surprise me if with CDR in particular, you'll start looking for any time you find yourself in front of a form that needs to be filled out, that you filled out exactly that information, probably 105 times earlier in just the previous few weeks. You start looking for, well, where is that, I don't know, share data or CDR button? Like, where is that button? And once you have enough people going, where is that button? And if it's not there, you're going to find that actually it's a competitive advantage for businesses, platforms, banks, whatever it is, to have it there. Just like NPPA went through a period of being a luxury good. Wow, it was real time. It was a really cool thing. And now it's really uncool if you don't have it. Like the assumption is it's there, and if it's not there, it's something bad, rather than the assumption it's not there, and if it is, it's really good. And I can think with CDR how that would happen very quickly. Oh, I need to fill that out myself. That's outrageous. A bit like previously you had a piece of paper you need to send by the post.
And let's kind of fast forward to maybe about kind of 5 years in the future. I mean, how do you think we might see, PayTo use cases change, or the kind of underlying infrastructure change, or what are some other opportunities we need to start focusing on now, given that it takes us a little while to deliver some of these things?
So alignment and leveraging of CDR payment initiation concepts I think that'll mean we don't have to go off the platform to authorize, and then that will start to really drive many use cases. It'll put it into one-time transactions, will become very, very easy to do, and that'll be a big game changer. We'll see that then not just when someone has an account that they'll link to, but it'll become a transactional level service. It'll be that icon that you look for on all of your transactions in the same way you now look for an Apple Pay. So, I look for the Apple Pay logo because I know that's going to be the easiest way for me to pay, rather than if I have to put a card detail in. So that's I think where we'll see PayTo heading.
I mean, I would love to see it that, in addition to managing your variable and one-off payments really easily, that you can make it just as easy to manage, your when your address changes, or when your name changes. Been married for 7 years, and pretty much all my accounts everywhere are still Jill Endries. And I will never change that because it's just too hard. Maybe Action Initiation can fix that, but until they AML me again, it's probably not going to happen. But I think that looking at how do we pair action initiation for updating, maintaining your details with PayTo as well. I think that gets really quite powerful.
Yeah, and I think one thing that we'll find increasingly, and it's already here, but there will be more of it, is that at the moment we still think of data and payments as quite distinct things, or data and value maybe as slightly different things. Obviously, blockchain, etc., make that distinction slightly less obvious. So we've seen in a Web 2 world, it's very much the monetization of data. I think right now we'll get into the datafication of money. Increasingly, you'll have one and the same type of policy document guiding both of them. You have a privacy statement at the moment that deals with how do I treat my client's personal information, and then I have a client monies policy that is how do I treat their money. It makes, I think, less and less sense in a CDR type world to have two different documents talking about something that is hugely intimate and private in both cases, but just different types of data. And at the moment, we're so used to transacting in one way for one of them and a totally different way for another. So my view is that we'll see value flows and data flows in general just becoming data flows. And I think bringing us together, sort of CDR and payments, is just going to seem very, very obvious. Maybe the other element to bring in, it's touching a little bit on what Nathan said earlier, is the international aspect. So as a foreigner, when I came to Australia first, I felt that there are so many awesome things about Australia. And there's this one strange thing, which is there's a really clearly defined difference between what's Australia and what's not Australia, which is obviously true. Everything in the world is either potato or not, but everything is, but ultimately it feels like the abroad is so different. And that's, geographically probably conditioned here, but I imagine that we are all going to feel that it shouldn't be such a different experience to move money and data across borders. It should feel increasingly like the same thing. And so I'm hoping that with these 3 steps and a few others, we can get essentially an internationalized, CDRized PayTo, and then we're going to wonder what on earth were we doing before that.
Is that a reality, do you think, Nathan, in the future? We're going to see something like that?
I think we will. I think that if you think about it, it's a two-step process. Yes, we will have eventually straight through, but we don't need to wait for the straight through to get an experience that is effectively real time. And that's something I think we'll start to get used to as we see so many apps that come out. Who thought that we would have then had 5 different apps that we would be very comfortable using? We've always talked about having everything had to be in one. Now we are seeing perhaps a move back to some super apps, but there's still plenty of cases where you can use different services for different things and it becomes seamless enough because your phone brings all that together.
Yep.
I think that CDR by principle was really talked about passporting, the idea of using your technical capabilities, but also like your accreditation or active status across borders as well. As also a foreigner, if you couldn't tell from my accent, that I remember like coming across and it was like, oh, I have a credit score, I have transactions, I've had job for years over there, but now you start from zero as well. So it's not just about, well, how can I buy my Nissan Leaf much cheaper directly from Japan, using PayTo, but it's also, well, how can I leverage my transaction data scoring across borders as well, because we are mobile and we have so much labor mobility as well.
A whole new world. I'm not sure how we're doing for time. I'm very conscious we're between you and Friday afternoon drinks, but we might open it up for any questions from the audience. Anybody got any?
So it seems like one of the elephants in the room here is monetization, and in a sense, for some of us in the business, while it's also an opportunity, could be an opportunity, it's also a bit of a threat. NPP and PayTo. As Christopher said, normally you make money by solving friction points, solving problems. And when you reduce the friction points, there's just less of a role for you to solve problems, and less new problems open up as a result of solving those. So go over one field and you see others. So the question is, where do you see the monetization opportunities for us players in the current payment market space that aren't there now?
Do you want to?
Yes. Look, I think your observation is obviously right, but so it was for the Luddites who started burning the spinning jennies. It was really, really difficult and dangerous when you have these machines that are doing lots of weavers' jobs, and you would think Britain would fall into some kind of wide recession and become nothing. And this was the early 1800s and became the superpower and financial powerhouse of the world. So it's not necessarily the case that innovation means there is less to do. And I think in this, and I'm being slightly facetious here, but I think what it means is that we're freeing ourselves up iteratively to solve more and more interesting problems. It's not actually a super exciting problem, to be honest, to move money between point A and point B. I know that's roughly what Monoova does, but if that was truly everything we did, then why wouldn't you just go to a bank teller and ask them, please move this one cash note to somewhere else, and they could help you with it. It's the fact that you're also solving speed, security, efficiency, reconciliation, all the other things across that. So if with better solutions, we are turning problems into something people don't even recognize is a problem anymore, then we allow ourselves and our clients, for that matter, and their customers to go, well, okay, I feel I'm slightly taller now. What else can I do? And that to me is, that's the cool bit.
It's cool. It's a bit stressful for those who are making spinning jennies right now.
But I think that's a fact of life, isn't it? It's about change, and it's about continuously to evolve and what the future opportunities are. I'm sure there'll be plenty.
Just on the consumer adoption piece, so we talked about some of the limitations, and when I think about the customer experience, they can go through NPP, but then their own bank may have a transaction limit, and so they might not know then that their payment's going to be declined, or they might not understand, and it might put them off NPP. So just wondered, is there any thoughts about how we can kind of solve that as an industry as well?
That's a question for you.
I was going to get Nathan to answer that one, actually. I think it's from a customer experience, it's an issue, and we need to kind of work through. And there's reasons why that's happening from a kind of, it might be a fraud or kind of risk perspective, that the banks want to make sure that their customers are protected as well. I mean, I think with PayTo, it should also be a better experience because the customer is authorising that payment and seeing who they're paying, and the bank knows that they're authorising that in their channel. So from a kind of safety and security perspective. But, I think it's always been sort of one of the challenges around real-time payments in terms of how you balance, kind of benefits from a customer experience perspective, but also making sure that people aren't, being kind of potentially exposed to what might be a fraudulent payment and someone scamming them. And particularly in this day and age, scams are forever on the increase, and those scammers are getting better and better every day. And there's a bit of a tension there. So
I think the value, though, is that this is being authenticated up front. It's coming from a platform that has been authenticated and an initiator that's been authenticated, and then you're having the payment outcome, whereas the current challenges around push payments are that they're almost blind and you don't know why the customer is making that payment, and you don't exactly know, especially if it's going to a BSB and account number, that the recipient is who it's intended to be. So I think the PayTo does solve a lot of those problems that will help to lift the risk thresholds of a number of participants.
A bit of a hybrid question of the last two, and this is probably so you talk about the customer experience, we're talking about, you just mentioned the BSB account number, that's where we're at the moment. It's banks. If you want to do money transfer from a merchant perspective, it's banks. Monoovan's ready, NPPA is ready, the banks aren't. And we are looking
What?
We're not.
Oh, sorry, I tell you. Not quite true.
Yeah. So, but do you, as a transition experience, is there a solution or something you can put out as a transition experience that says, okay, I'm a big fan of PayTo. I think it solves for ourselves, one of the larger merchants, something we've been looking for. So, I prefer to go sooner rather than later potentially, but also conscious of it's a subset of customers at the moment. So if I sign them up, today, what's the solution for that transition until we get all the banks online so we can capitalise on that experience you've all talked about today, but at the moment it's not available to everyone.
Yeah, look, I think it's, my joke aside, I think it's a great question. The fact that it's variability doesn't mean that there isn't value. And we can draw a little bit on our experience from launching NPP from Monoova's point of view, which was essentially the same time as it was launched in the industry as a whole. Which is that variability starts creating, at some level, competitive pressures between participant institutions who realize that I'm getting questions from my institutional level clients and others, and it took a long time before institutional level clients got NPP enabled. And they're wondering why can't we do what they can do at the other Big Four bank or wherever it may be. So that's one level that actually even getting started means we're probably speeding things up a little bit. The other one is that, of course, we can move money today with existing systems. It's just not quite as good. And so there can be lots of failover mechanisms if you want. And the most important thing there, I think, for that to be successful is that there is clear communication with the ultimate consumer of the transaction, whether that is the beneficiary or the payer. So, for instance, it is probably not a great experience, and this is how Monoova's designed this. We do not automatically reroute an NPP transaction, a push transaction, from NPP to direct entry if it doesn't work. If, for instance, a recipient bank is not NPP enabled, which is almost unheard of today, but back not too many days ago when that was the case, we wouldn't just, without telling our clients, move it on direct entry, and then 2 days later the money arrived. We would tell our client it's not working, and then they could communicate to their customer and say, looks like your bank isn't enabled. It will probably take 48 hours or 24 hours, whatever it is. And so they could communicate to their client effectively and then choose to use a direct entry transaction on our part. I think doing something similar on PayTo is going to be a feasible way forward. And I wouldn't be surprised because the first bank to go live, and I think this is okay, the Big Four, is probably going to be CBA's NetBank. That is an awful lot of first bank. Yeah. I mean, that's what, 40% of all consumer accounts or something, like a large number. So you can imagine the types of business that are our clients saying, if you're with CBA, you can actually fund your transaction in real time right now. If you're not, maybe talk to your bank. And those things, I think, will have some weight. But ultimately, we're talking about a really short period of time in the history of payments. Yeah. We're talking about a 12-month period, possibly, where things are a bit dicey. And after that, we won't even remember today.
Yeah.
And we're providing the pay-to-payer services for 35 other banks, plus a number of tier twos, and they see this is going to be a customer attraction. They will see, they're thinking of it as Apple Pay was very early on. It was, oh, well, my bank is actually delivering me something that gives me something more than somebody else. And while we won't be encouraging them to go out and do that as an above-the-line acquisition strategy, customers know the difference. Also, it is a digital solution, so you get in real time, you know whether it's going to work or not, which is perhaps not the same with some other solutions in the past where you haven't known what the outcome's going to be.
Thank you. It's a big fan.
That's it. We're just all going to move our accounts to CBA. I think we've got time maybe for any more questions from the audience. People just want drinks now. Any final closing thoughts from our panelists?
Always. No, actually, after the panelists, I'll just say a final word for everyone. So.
Okay, but it is, I guess, we are on day zero of, or day one of something that is going to be very groundbreaking and changing. We've been seeing in other markets that the world is looking to Australia for a CDR because we've actually done it better than many other countries. And I think that PayTo is going to be the same thing. So, you know, those of us that are offering PayTo to our customers or providing capability at a service provider level, I think this is a time in our business life cycle that we'll look back on and say that we were there as part of the initial change that shifted payments to be leading as an account-based solution as opposed to a extra thing that is done outside the account.
Absolutely. No, I view that as something really similar to your thoughts, whereas right now it's viewed as a, oh, it's not 100% addressable market. Is this actually going to work? Is this going to be a thing? What's the customer experience? There's more questions than answers. But I feel like it's actually a time of radical innovation instead of just incremental innovation. It's thinking about now, like even, well, we have some of his customers, but thinking about like when companies used to be all on-prem, now you'd be like, oh my gosh, you're not on the cloud? Like, how have you not made that migration? I feel like that's going to be something really similar for data payments and a really, in the value exchange as well. Well, I feel like it's not easy being the pioneers of our different parts, but at the same time, that makes us experts, and we're ultimately super committed on a principle level of what this actually means.
Absolutely, and it's really great to feel like a pioneer about something that is so new. And the great thing, of course, with something new is that it's very easy to be the one who knows a lot, because there really aren't sort of legions of people who have gone before you in this particular field. I think for a company like Monoova, we are, as you know well by now, very young. Like we would have no role to play, and in something that was truly established where everything was figured out. Like again, we are not pioneers in BEX. That has been figured out a long time ago. But it's fun, I think, at all levels, both at a personal and a company level, to be working on something that's really changing and that hopefully needs to be bringing lots of value to people who are using it. So it's fun, and I love your sense there of, where were you on day one? I feel like, we should think like that. It should be like, where were you when, people were landing on the moon, or you saw the first iPhone? Where were you on the 5th of August, 2022? And with that, I would like to thank everyone. You were here. And so there are more drinks, more balcony, and a great thank you to all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.